Hello and welcome to the CEO Show with the number one ranking CEO magazine worldwide. I'm your host, Nick Vaidya. Today we have as our guest an incredibly successful executive, Tiger N.V. Tyagarajan, the CEO of Genpact. Started in 1997, today Genpact boasts 62,000 employees and Tiger has played an instrumental role right since the inception. Now, despite our two pre-flight checks, we had a little bit of difficulty, so we are going to be running on our backup system. Nonetheless, what you will hear is going to be worth its weight in gold, and I know that. So let us welcome Tiger to our show. A very warm welcome to you, Tiger. You've been with Genpact pretty much through its inception, responsible for if not responsible, at least, right through the diversification and growth strategy of Genpact, right at the center of the globalization trend and the big data trend. So you probably have an insight that a lot of people don't have. And so that's the things that I wanted to hear from you, your perspective, from your perch. What do you see happening in the space, in what's now Genpact and what it originally started out? If I'm not wrong, in 1997, when it was started, it was basically for GE and mostly for back office data analysis. Is that right?
Yeah, so when we started, it was 1997. You're right. It was actually originally for GE Capital, which is the financial services arm of GE. And it was really for back office services, simple stuff to begin with, and very simple data analytics stuff to begin with. So those are the two: processing of mortgage applications, credit card applications, etc., and data analytics of a very simple kind. And then over the years, until 2005, kept doing work of a similar nature with all the G Capital and GE businesses, and then subsequently kept moving up the value chain into more complex work. By the time we spun off into an independent company in 2005, we were 15,000 people doing a range of services from very simple to very complex, spread across, at that time, 4 countries in the world from where we provided services. And that was what we were in 2005.
And now you have 24 back-end service centers, over 700 clients, right?
No, we have 75 plus delivery centers.
Really?
In 20 countries. So the delivery centers are located in 20 countries, but there are 75 centers. Some countries have many centers. China being an example, India being another example, Philippines is the third example, etc. And we serve 700 clients, but I would call out probably about 200 of them as being multi-geography, multi-services, complex delivery. And the other 400 to 500 are specific point solutions for specific capabilities in a specific spot.
And so it's not data analysis anymore. You've gone up the value chain, and I understand it's not truly a consulting company, but it's neither a IT services vendor. So what exactly, in what space are you operating? I had a little hard time trying to figure that one out.
Right. So the way to think about us, Nick, is the following. We started our journey with GE basically doing what I would call day-to-day processes for a business. So you can pick any kind of process. So a mortgage business processes mortgage applications. Manufacturing business pays supplier bills. Every business has to manage their books of accounts. At the end of each month, you got to close the books. So at the end of each quarter, you got to prepare the financials, and on and on and on and on. We do a lot of that. And as you can imagine, some of that is simple and some of that is complex. Over time, we've grown into more and more complex work over our history of 15 plus years. And we do that for a range of clients across a range of industries. The fact that we grew up with GE gave us the advantage of learning many industries. If we had grown up with another type of business that had one business, we would have learned that one business. We grew up with someone who had 20 unconnected industry sectors, therefore we learned all those 20. So today 70% of what we do is actually run things for our clients. We call that run things. About 20 odd percent, no, 60% of what we do is run things for our clients. 25% of what we do is technology that is connected to what we run. So if we are running finance for a client, then the underlying technology platform for finance, we often get involved in improving it, maintaining it. So it could be Oracle Finance, it could be SAP, and so on. And then about 15+% of our business is analytical services. So given the fact that we run a number of these processes, we obviously look at a lot of data, and then our ability to take that data and create insights for our clients in a world where data is becoming very, very important. It's ubiquitous. People want insights, and they want to drive intelligence using data. So those are the three segments of our business, and they obviously all feed into each other. Mm-hmm. And last point I would make is our heritage, therefore, is process. That's what we are known for. We compete with people whose heritage is technology and consulting. We obviously also have technology, but our view of the world is fix the process, then bring in technology. So we have a very biased view and a different view of the world. And the other view that we have is consulting is good, but it's so much better if after you consult and tell me what to do, can you do it for me? So our view is consulting built on a heritage of doing is so much better than just consulting.
That is true, and you know, we have seen Monitor Group fail, and a lot of noise being made about the 5 forces. Where did the consultants go wrong? If they couldn't see for their own company, what are they doing for others? So yeah, and personally, I come from a consulting background as well. There are holes in consulting, which people are realizing now. Ultimately, the results matter, and consulting is all good and fine and dandy, and sometimes it does work, but oftentimes it fails. So I see. Now, you've also developed some of your own IP in the way. On the way to this process, you've developed something that is in your intellectual capital, and you can move forward for a sale on that basis.
Yeah, so over the years, as I said, we focused a lot of our attention on process. So if we take any process that a company typically has, so let's pick one. Let's pick the process of a big equipment that is made by a corporation and is sold to their client, and that equipment has a life of 20 years, and that equipment needs to be maintained. And obviously there is a warranty contract that is there between the buyer and the seller of the equipment. And let's say the equipment has 50,000 parts. So any one of those parts could fail, and so on and so forth. One we do, for example, is do the analytics that predict when the equipment is going to have a problem with a particular part, et cetera, et cetera. We then find a way to make sure that that part is available at the closest repair shop that that enterprise has. And then we make sure that the client knows that the equipment may fail, let's say in a week. We make sure that the engineer who's supposed to service that equipment is available on a particular date. The part that may need the servicing gets shipped to that spot where that part may have to be used to change the part. Bringing all that together and delivering that is a big service that we end up providing for a number of our clients. Now, when you see the ecosystem of doing this, the value that it creates is keeping the equipment up always, so it never needs to be down. And some of these are such expensive equipment that if they go down for even 2 hours, it's a big cost for everyone. And two, doing it in a manner where the client satisfaction is high. The parts that are maintained across the globe to maintain that equipment is as low as possible, because you don't need to maintain massive amount of inventory, and on and on and on. Those are the kind of things that now we have morphed to.
But shouldn't that be a core competence of an organization? Why would they want to outsource that thing? Maybe they're not doing it at all. You're saying, well, we'll come and teach you how to do it.
No, so it's a great question, Nick. So here's the way I would think about it. At the end of the day, every organization and every industry has to define what their true core competency is. Why do they win in the marketplace versus their competitor? So that's one decision they have to really think hard and make. The other decision they have to make is, even in a particular space, let's take this equipment example. servicing a client and a warranty, I suspect, is an important aspect of that business. So one would say, isn't that core competency? The answer is yes, but which part of it is core competency? I would argue that the part that allows the specific spare part to be in the hands of the field engineer, then talking to the owner of the equipment and talking about what they need to do to keep it up in the future, to be able to diagnose why the problem happened so that they can give it back to design. That's core competency. That's intellectual property. Making sure the part reaches, there's predictability in when a part is going to fail. I mean, that actually is something that can be done in a shared services. You can do it for many people. You can do it at scale. And if you do it at scale, the chances are you're going to do a much better job. You're going to build intellectual property that can be used and leveraged across a broad range of equipment. So I think the world is getting more and more defining what is true core competency. And the more that happens, there are going to be organizations that have become very, very strong in some areas, and other organizations that are strong in other areas that become service providers to these organizations.
Right. So
we think the world is going there.
And so in other words, you are able to coalesce and collect disparate, disjointed sort of data, because otherwise they won't have access to it. And that becomes your IP. And at the same time, because of it, you're able to service your clients better. So in a sense, even though you started as an analytics company, more in the big data space, but actually you have embellished it tremendously to make the big data just one of the commodity offering within your entire portfolio.
So Nick, I think I would say that it would be a little unfair and I think we would be immodest if we were to say that we started off as a big data analytics company. I think we started off as a process back office company. We were fortunate to actually jump onto analytical services very early in our evolution, within the first year itself. And again, there it would be very simple analytical services. Over the years, obviously working with the same clients, we've built more and more complex analytical services. So today, clearly, we use analytics and the data that we see to build IP for our clients. We use analytics to build for ourselves so that we can take it back to clients over time. And the third is we provide analytical services with the data that our clients provide us as a separate service itself. So all three we do. And I think now it's become far more integrated, but it's still very early days, as you can imagine, of the big data revolution.
Right. I mean, the big data itself is sort of, some people say in its infancy, some people say it's going the wrong direction. I've talked to so many different people, including Professor Fader from Wharton, who thinks a little bit like me that, we're going the wrong way, but we'll get into that some other time. What I want to get from you now is, it sounds like you're obviously serving the large global clients. Do you see that this kind of service / analysis implementation can also serve the mid-market ever?
I think, Nick, there clearly is an opportunity to serve the mid-market, probably even more than the large corporations. But the mid-market companies will not be able to do this themselves. They won't have the IP, they won't have the scale, they won't have the capital, or most importantly, they won't have the management bandwidth to do this. And that's where actually the biggest difference comes in, even for large corporations. Focus. Because we do the same thing for so many people, we end up focusing on it. We have no option. And therefore, we build IP around it. An equipment manufacturer will not be able to build IP on everything. They have to pick and choose where they would want to build IP. So mid-market companies, great opportunities. The challenge is going to be, how do you access them? How do you reach them? I suspect someone will. There are going to be businesses that will be built around reaching mid-market and smaller companies around these types of things. I'm not sure necessarily it'll be the same companies that reach large corporations. It could be. But I suspect it is possible that you could have a set of companies that are focused on large corporations and another set of companies that are focused on mid and smaller companies. But clearly that's a big opportunity.
So from an entrepreneurial perspective, and you probably have reasons not to speculate or even give your expertise on that, but if there were entrepreneurs who wanted to get into this space, which is one of the reasons I'm talking with you, is what are the things they need to do? How do they need to look at things differently? Because back in the days, a few years ago, there was the cost arbitrage, which is kind of gradually fading. And really, if you're competing with the best of the world, you need not focus on cost arbitrage. You need to give value and take your fair share. So there's Mu Sigma, there is smaller organizations, Fractal, there's a bunch of others from India particularly, but also within the US, there are companies that are wanting to get into the big data in different ways, either in terms of talent providers or in terms of IP providers or machine learning. There are different perspectives. People are coming from all over the place with different backgrounds trying to attack the same problem. Where do you see, and this is a complex question, the reason I want to lay it out to you so that you can answer it the way you deem fit. There is the idea of one group thinks that, the machine learning and machine analytics and the power that we have now will make human analytics sort of less valuable or less needed. The data can figure it out things by themselves through machine learning. And there's another group that is coming from purely technology background, big cloud servers and stuff like that. And then there's the cost arbitrage, the group that we see a lot coming from India and foreign countries outside of the US. How do you foresee this thing playing out in the future, both for mid-market and for large corporation? Having explained this, I'll make it simpler for you. For the mid-market, what do you think first?
Yeah, so Nick, like a true consultant, the answer is going to be all of the above are true. A little bit. What does that mean? It means that clearly, let me start with the one that you said is not important. We find labor arbitrage continues to be not an unimportant initial benefit that everyone wants, because what it gives to them are 3 or 4 things. It gives them immediate legitimacy. It gives them immediate investment dollars, and it gives them immediate buy-in and change management capabilities. So from a global delivery perspective, if you're capable of driving labor arbitrage for many reasons, and labor arbitrage we think about it in 2 ways. Cost of labor to do something is lesser in one domain versus another, in one geography versus another. That's one element. But there's another element, which is if someone is doing it in 100 places and people are spread across 100 places doing it, by bringing it together, you can make that half the team. So that itself is productivity, and the combination of cost arbitrage plus productivity is a big number by itself and is very attractive. Then you underlay technology that makes some of the decision making that those people do automated, because you teach the machine to take those decisions. Machine learning, algorithms that are self-learning, artificial intelligence, etc. The reality is those have existed for many years. They're getting more sophisticated. But I don't think they take away what is most important, in my opinion, for real value creation, which is the third element, which is true contextual understanding of the problem that the client is solving, of the business context in which it is being solved, of the competitive environment in which it is being solved, and the trade-offs in that specific situation. So, we find most value when you can bring all 3 of these together in some proportion. In some cases, one is bigger than the other, etc. Over time, those proportions change. But anyone who says it's one at the expense of the other 2, I think is making a mistake. I think it's all 3. We find great value, for example, because we run a number of things. Our ability to build the business context for example, in that same example, if we then build models to tell the manufacturer, in your 1,000 repair plants across the globe, here are the inventory parts that you should maintain for your 50,000 parts in every one of those repair shops. Our to understand why I'm saying that in a particular part versus another is not just the mathematics, but it's also the business context of the importance of those parts and what's happened recently around those parts, etc., etc., etc. Sometimes we find it very difficult to model all of that into a machine. Over time, I'm sure some of that would be. So I know it's a complex answer. And therefore, to your question on mid-market, when you serve the mid-market, what are they least capable of being able to do? Global delivery, no chance. Very tough for a mid-market client to say, I'm going to set up something in Chile, or I'm going to set up something in Brazil. Impossible. Second, technology. Technology is actually possible. They could buy technology. They could, these days on the cloud, you pay by the drink. So that's the easier part. So as technology automation rolls in, but here's the problem with technology. Our view is that technology comes in only after you've fixed your process and the data is clean. We have a saying in the company, it is better to run a manual, unautomated process that produces defects at a certain rate. Let's say it produces 50% defect rate. So which means you have 50% chance that you're right and you have 50% chance that you're wrong. Then you go and automate it without fixing the process. You have done three things. You've spent money, which is fine. As long as the benefit is there, that's good, not a problem, on the technology. Second, you've now systematically made sure that defects get created without randomness, which means you've systematically ensured that you will always have 50% defect rates. Whereas at least in the past, there were times when there were no defects. It was random. So our view is that fix the process before you implement the technology, reduce the defects, then you implement the technology. And I think mid-market companies struggle with that.
Right, and this reminds me of a favorite quote of mine that again comes from India, which talks about get rid of the fish, don't bother with the deodorant, because if you're not going to get rid of the fish, that thing will never go away.
Great one. I've never heard of that one.
Yeah, actually, it's Swami Parthasarthi, whom I read a lot, and I've met with him, have had the opportunity of meeting with him one time. He's an incredible person. But he's written some books, and I really like that stuff. So this is great. This is wonderful. Very, very, very helpful. It sheds a certain light. Now, I'll give you an example of an organization which you know of very well, but I won't name it. But one of the large IT technology hardware producers. And they've got over 250,000 models that they recalibrate every quarter. I mean, this is mind-boggling to me. I come from a variety of backgrounds, but independent of where a person comes from, if you know anything about models, that's a huge, massive number. Humans couldn't possibly do that. So, what do you say to that?
So great problem to have for a company like us, right? Because we thrive in such situations. The reality is actually for some time, the world has been going there. In financial services, regulatory requirements are forcing people to revisit all models, to recast all models, to prepare stress tests of all their portfolios and all their products across all their businesses across the globe. And that is a multiplier that's massive. So I'm not surprised at the 250,000 number. So there are two ways that most people think about this as they sit back and think about it. One is, what do I do today? Because I have to solve it today. And then what do I do in the long run? Because I can't solve it the same way in the long run. So there is a tactical today answer and there is a long run answer. So the tactical today answer is, I've got to attack and create the capacity to be able to do that 250,000 times every quarter. Okay, so how are you going to do that and how much is it going to cost you? Well, I'm going to try and find a way to do that quickly, and I'm going to try and do that at the lowest cost possible. That's why labor arbitrage does still become important. Capacity still becomes important, because part of this trend is also long-term demographics that are playing out. Incredible long-term demographics that have no chance of changing for decades going forward that are playing out. And some years back there was this Economist article on the war for talent, And then the global financial crisis hit, and people were saying there's no war for talent. My view is that the war for talent has always been there, is still there. When you really want people of a certain domain in a certain place, you still don't get them. And it's a question of 1 or 2% GDP growth, and all of a sudden the war for talent will become acute, because the labor pool with the right capabilities is still very thin. So there's a whole education mapping to needs problem that we all know exists.
That takes me to the second question, actually, that you're talking about. I wanted to point out. So, there is a shortage of talent, even in analytics, particularly analytics. But then there's the domain expertise that these analysts need to have. It's not just the ability to crunch numbers. Does that change the dynamics that you're seeing right now? Obviously, your 70 centers is probably a result of not finding enough people at certain locations. But moving forward, when you talk of mid-market, you are helping the large Fortune 500 and the Fortune 2000 companies. But still, you've got a lot of ways. The industry as such has a long way to go. We've probably touched maybe 30-40% of them. And that's a number I'm just picking up based on my understanding of things. But there's a whole way to go. And then there's the mid-market, which is much bigger. So how do you see, what do you see going forward in terms of how to attack talent? And it's almost like you said the war for talent is there, and there's the equivalence of 25-year-old scotch. There's a big shortage. You can't make it quickly.
Yeah. No, so the only option is to make talent. You're right. So going back, there is a shortage of single malts. There is a limitation. So what do? If you can find a way to make single malts, that's the answer. Now, obviously, there is no such thing as find a way to make single malts. So what we focus a lot of our attention on is making talent, and making talent mean taking great raw material and teaching people the specific domain that is needed to be successful over time. So we have people who join us, who joined us 15 years back, 10 years back, as someone who does very simple accounting work or very simple financial services work. And today they are CPAs. They can close the books of clients. They can do very complex financial analysis. They can do hedging strategies. They've learned that over the years. We provide the avenue to teach them. Why do we do that? Because we think that prepares them for the next role. As we prepare them for the next role, it allows our client to give us the next piece of work, which is complex, because they know we have the raw material whom we have prepared to deal with that. So that helps me grow revenue. That person doesn't leave. So therefore, I drive retention up. So it becomes a nice virtuous cycle. So how do you deal with the war for talent? I think the war for talent is dealt with across the globe by corporations and private sector actually realizing that it's their job to teach people, because teaching no longer is going to be something that you go to school and college 10, 20 years and then use that to produce for the next 40 years. Because nothing that you learn in college lasts more than 1 or 2 years these days. Everything changes. Right. So by the time you're into your second and third year, things that you learned in college are all old. That's the way the world is today. So what do you have to do? What corporations have to do is constantly teach people. So rejuvenation and teaching becomes critical. Employees have to understand that they have to constantly learn. There's no option. Otherwise, they'll get stale. Governments have to understand that between them and the corporations, they have to create the capital and the expense to be able to take people out, to make them learn and then bring them back into the workforce. So this notion of 20 years learning, 40 years production, 40 years retirement, I think is going to go away. I think it's going to be, some learning foundation. Maybe it is 20 years, but then it is 3 years of working and production, 3 months of learning. 3 years of working, 3 months of learning, continuous. So you go through life constantly learning. And therefore, organizations have to be willing to let go for 3 months. They have to create much more flexibility. So there's a whole change that I think the combination of fast technology changes, therefore requiring big learning and global talent shortage, is going to create. Organizations such as ours and other organizations like us that have to deal with it in any case because of the nature of our business, I think are very well positioned because that's become our ecosystem. But I think every corporation, irrespective of the industry they're in, has to do this.
This is very interesting and very nice to hear from you say that. I always talk about education is not an event. My doctoral work was in educational psychology, by the way. So I've done a lot of different variety of things. And it is true, in the current dynamic environment, even in the past, but more so now, because so much is changing all the time. It's not just agile ABC, it's also agile man force or resources. You've got to get the agility in there to constantly be learning and growing. Companies like McKinsey and Google, they have 20% of, or whatever the numbers may be, of their time allocated to constantly keep on learning. In fact, McKinsey has a process where at the end of the day, you need to think through and become cognizant of, okay, what did I learn today and what do I need to do next? So I think that mentality has to change across the world, as not just the US or any one particular place. So I really appreciate it. And that is a great segue into one other set of questions. I know you come from your Unilever background, which has a great program for mentorship and teaching. I had a great conversation with Bindi Banga, whom you may or may not have come in contact with. And he talked about how much he learned there. So you come from there. How did the education there, what kind of education did you get there? How has it influenced your ability to succeed the way you have done here?
That goes back 25 plus years. So that was the first set of 6-7 years in corporate life that I spent. What I really learned there, because the role that I had, I was in sales and I was in consumer product sales. So I was managing a set of salespeople out in the field, distribution, logistics, and a whole set of stockists and retailers and distributors. And what it taught me was, as a 23-year-old, 24-year-old, which is when I started doing it, how do you manage the aspirations of a 50-year-old? How do you motivate a 50-year-old? How do you drive human behavior to aspire to get to places that otherwise, they wouldn't have been able to go to? And how do you do that without making them feel as though they don't know it because they've done it for 30 years and they're more, they're more experienced in those areas than you are? How do you make them turn around and teach you, even though you are actually their boss? So it's a weird. So and then of course, learning behaviors out in the field in different states, because I was doing this in India, in different cities and states in India, each of them with a different culture, different language. So the ability to manage that diversity, to manage to plans and numbers, to drive motivation in large teams, to get them to go where you think they should go. At the same time, realizing that actually they know more than you and making them realize that actually they should be teaching you. Those are kind of things I learned there. I would never ever give up those first 6 years of what I learned there.
That is really neat. And interpersonal skills, and not just, these are not interpersonal skills. This is way beyond interpersonal skills. It gets to the core of getting things done, how to make things happen. And it involves a complex set of issues being taken into consideration in a given single moment. I realize that because I started.
I'll give you one anecdote, which I still, and I think it's deep inside. So I use it in different conceptual frameworks the same way. So I used to have 30 salespeople across, a large territory, let's say state of New York, that kind of state. This was actually the state of Maharashtra, if you remember, Maharashtra, Bombay, etc. And there, every day, these salespeople would go and sell products of the company to a bunch of retailers, mom and pop shops, chains, etc. At the end of the day, they're supposed to prepare a daily sales report which says exactly who they sold what to, etc. And therefore, what is the total sales for the month that they've done, and what is the target, etc. I realized that it's important for them to document that, not because it's important for them to document anything, because in the end, the sales will get recorded because someone will record the sales. It's important for them to actually figure out what they sold and then write down, I sold X and I'm only 20% of my way to the target and it's half the month done. When you see that, it drives a different behavior. So what did I do? I basically told everyone that 24 hours, and those days there were no emails, there was nothing. I said 24 hours after the end of a day, the daily sales report should reach where I was, which was headquarters of that region, should reach my desk. So I would get 30 of these every day, dating back to the day before yesterday. I would take 29 of them and throw them into the dustbin without even looking at them. I would pick one random one. I would pick one random item that was either great or bad, and I would send out a note to all 30 people saying, hey, John Smith did this, this happened, wonderful, da 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 da. So they thought I was reading everything. So they would diligently write it. In the bargain, they actually understood exactly how far they are from target, what they're missing. So it drove motivation. I think it drove motivation. Our performance went up just by doing that.
This is an amazing example. Goes to the same thing, process. Even human behavior is full of processes, and we are hardwired oftentimes, unless we actively go and change our hardwiring. We follow the process. We react the same way to 9.99 to 70% sales. And these things work their natural way. There's a book called Predictable Irrationality, and they talk about these same issues. I think the process works everywhere, and when we attack the process, that's how the big behavioral changes take place. It's a great example. And, I remember those days because I used to work for Walters in the Vidarbha region back when I started my career, later than you, of course. And we used to get these pink slips and the blue slips. They won't even make photocopies. It was a carbon copy. So I know exactly what you mean.
Right.
Tiger, thank you so much. I really, really enjoyed talking with you.
Nick, this is really wonderful. And I really apologize for that video conference thing, but this worked really well.